Isaiah 40:11 says about Jesus Christ, "He shall lead his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom and lead those with young gently." So we have some goats here. We don't have lambs, but we have some kids. I'm going to show you what's entailed with being a shepherd. It's far more than filling up a hay bag with hay every day, and also it's far more than just giving them fresh water every day. We have 2 water pails here and 2 bags of hay. But let me show you some of the stuff that's involved in this. Far more, so detailed. And Jesus is so detailed. Every minute detail of our lives he cares about. Let's make this analogy. So one thing we need is cleanliness. You see all this poop on the ground out here? This is every morning. This all has to be raked up. But you examine the poop. You always take a look at it and make sure that the manure looks like little black beans. But sometimes you'll see clusters. And I saw some yesterday. So here's what a cluster looks like. And when you start seeing, that's what a cluster looks like. When you start seeing the manure clustered, you know that it's a little wet and probably is a start of diarrhea possibly. So you have to kind of consider their health. Besides just having bags of hay, and you need to make sure the hay is good quality, not dusty, not moldy, the right amount of protein. Goats have to have minerals every day. If you're not giving your goats minerals, then they're going to be in trouble. Goats have to have copper, they have to have selenium, they have to have calcium, magnesium, zinc, other things, and that's on a daily basis. Well, someone will say, hey, out in the wild they don't get that. They absolutely do. Goats go up on the mountains and all these minerals are found, and they will search for them, all the salts that they need, all the minerals they need. Besides that, goats should be given baking soda at least once a week. I learned this from the breeder I bought them from, who's a vet tech. The baking soda helps reduce bloating, which can be a serious problem with goats. If you're going to be a good shepherd, you also need to keep good records. Each goat here has its own individual sheet. This is called a barn chart. We keep up with their weight. We keep up with any medications that are given. If you notice, I just trimmed their hooves the other day. On 720, I trimmed their hooves. Hooves have to be trimmed. Somebody might say, well, goats in the wild don't get their hooves trimmed. But God didn't put them in soft pastures. He put them on stony mountains where they climb and the stones grind their hooves and keep them even. I'm going to show you what we have to do in order to do that trimming. Also, if you'll notice in the chart, we keep up with their body weight. We weigh them on a regular basis to see if they're gaining weight or losing weight. That's important to know. A goat could be losing weight and you don't realize it until maybe a serious problem's taking place. So weigh them regularly. And here's what I was advised by the goat breeder, who is a vet tech. Have a full first aid kit, vitamin B complex, because sometimes goats get polio. My daughter lost her goat through polio. Sometimes they get an eye infection, and sometimes Gas X will relieve the bloat if it gets bad. But there are certain things that you need to have on hand all the time. You need to have blood stop. This stops bleeding. When you're trimming the hooves, you could, like the first time ever, I was trimming the baby goat's hooves and I just barely nipped the skin. It didn't bleed much at all, but I put the blood stop on there. But you should have all kinds of things on hand that might be needed. I have goat electrolytes. Sometime in the summer, they'll start to dehydrate. They need electrolytes right away. You have wound coat. I sprayed that on when I nicked Lucas's heel. I have selenium in case they need that in an emergency. So you keep these things on hand. Ivermectin, which is for parasites, and a thermometer to take their temperature. So little Daniel here is the runt from the herd. He was only 2.6 pounds when he was born. He's still way behind. So today I bought some raw whole goat milk from the farm. I'm going to start feeding him a bottle in between. But their hooves should be flat and smooth on the bottom. They are now because I trimmed them. This hoof wall, this is soft skin. The hoof wall will grow over the skin, and it'll start getting manure in there and dirt, and it will really stink and it will rot their hooves. You must trim their hooves every couple months or so. Now the big goats, I have to put on the milking stand and lock their head in, give them grain so they'll eat while I'm doing it, but their hooves have to be trimmed and used. These are pretty sharp. So you trim the hoof even with the line of fur right here. You make the bottom parallel to that. The toe will grow faster, so you trim that off. That's very necessary if you have goats. If you just ignore all these things, you could have major health problems, and you're probably going to have dead goats. On top of all that, I definitely pray over them daily too. This next step might be the most important of all, and that is to check their eyes on a weekly basis. It's called the Pharmacia score. You cover, push, pull, and pop. So you cover the top with one thumb, push in slightly, and pop out. When I pull down, that membrane pops out under the eye, and you see it's like a medium pink. Well, there's 5 colors on the Pharmacia score, and there's a chart you get. You can become certified. You can do it distance through a university, or you can go for classes. If you do it by distance, you take a video of yourself doing this, and they give you the chart. There's 5 colors on there. Dark pink is good. When it gets a little lighter, you might start considering a dose. Number 3 is probably dose them. Number 4 is very light pink. You give them a dose of worming medicine. Number 5 is almost white. They'll probably die anyway. It's too late. So all goats, and they eat, and this whole continent are going to get barber pole worms. They're little spiral worms shaped like a barber pole, and they're in the grass. They're in all areas of weeds. And they get in their stomach, and they have one big sharp tooth, and they slit their stomach. Now, a goat has 4 stomachs. The first one is the rumen. They get in there, and they start slitting the stomach and drinking the blood. Your goat is bleeding internally, and they're anemic. You don't know it. They can be running around and drop dead 15 minutes later. So you look at that Pharmacia score. Right now, Isabel just showed a fairly light pink. I'm going to give her worming medicine. The vet dewormed them all in May, but this is the end of July. And you don't just give goats worming every month. They'll become immune. You give it only when needed. So you check the Pharmacia score, F-A-M-A-C-H-A, and we'll put the chart up on this video so you can see a picture of the eye with the 5 different tints of pink. You have to do this. When people say, oh, I had a goat die or had 2 goats die, they're not doing due diligence. You pray over your animal, but you have to do due diligence. You're putting them in environments that are not natural. Animals in the wild roam for miles. We put them in concentrated areas. That's why I have to clean up all the fecal matter. You can't have all this fecal matter. God commanded the children of Israel to go out of the camp and relieve themselves. You don't keep sewage in the open around where the living creatures are or the humans are. So, do you think you would like to be a farmer? If you have goats, if you have sheep, if you have cows, ducks require attention. It's more than throwing them into a pasture, giving them some food and water and letting them raise themselves. That is not the environment that God gave to them. They were up on mountains, stony mountains, roaming miles and miles. Fecal matter is dropped hundreds of yards or half a mile apart. And they do fertilize the pasture with it, but it's work. And if you're going to be a good shepherd, you have to pay attention to all these details. Now, after I'm done this video, I'm going to rake up all this poop, which I do every day. Now, if I have to do this for 6 goats, I have 2 grown goats and 4 baby goats. Amount of work, an hour in the morning, usually about a half hour in the evening, and then through the day you have to check on them. How much more do you think Jesus, the Good Shepherd, who gave his life for us, cares for every detail? Now you think, oh, I can't bother God with this. This is such a tiny thing. The very hairs of your head are numbered. Do you feel sad? He cares. When I notice a goat is lethargic, I have to look at him and see if anything's wrong. Do you think Jesus doesn't care when you're sad, when you're depressed, when you're discouraged, when you're not feeling well, when you have a financial problem? He cares about every detail of your life. He loves you with an everlasting love. He is the Good Shepherd, and nothing is impossible for him, and nothing is too big for him, and nothing is too small for him. Cast all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Go to Jesus, receive him as Lord and Savior if you haven't, and if you have, you're his children, and he will care for every tiny detail of your life.